Throughout history, instances of rival nations working together in order to improve upon existing technologies occurs every so often. The Sino-American Jaguar Tank is one such example. This vehicle, of which was a cooperative effort between China and the United States to improve upon the Type 59 tank for both the Chinese domestic and export market, grew out of strengthening relations that began via the detente of the 1970s. The upgraded tank was needed as China had military numbers but lacked severely in terms of quality and technology, both of which they had hoped would come via partnership with the US. Due to said improving relations with China, this project was seen as a means to eventually turn China into an ally or, at the very least, a partner with the United States. Owing to the fallout between the Soviet Union, of which was still active at this time, and China, the Jaguar tank was also seen as a way to bolster China's defense while simultaneously opening them to further US cooperation. Despite the obvious need for this tank to stock Chinese arsenals, the Jaguar took some time for design and production work to begin, as it did not start until the mid to late 1980s, over a decade after relations began thawing between the two powers. An official announcement came from the American tank manufacturer Cadillac Gauge in late 1988, stating that they had been working with the Chinese National Machinery, Equipment Import and Export Corporation for this project. Two Type 59 tanks, of which are essentially Chinese-made T-54 tanks, were given to Cadillac Gauge in order to begin work. Ultimately, this would end up being an upgrade package to the Type 59, of which was seriously outdated by the time that work began on this project, as this vehicle was first introduced into service in 1959, though the Type 59 itself again was based on the T-54A, of which was an upgraded T-54 that was produced from 1956. The foundations of this tank, however, lie in the aftermath of World War II in the Soviet Union, with the very first T-54 seeing service in 1947, making the basis of the Jaguar essentially 40 years old by the time that work began on this project. With the Type 59 again being the basis of this upgraded vehicle, it would have many of the faults and characteristics of the chassis, including the same 55 km/h top speed, though there were considerations that ultimately fell through to equip this vehicle with a new hydropneumatic suspension, which certainly would have improved the overall maneuverability of this Jaguar versus the Type 59. Despite having the same top speed, however, it had a much more powerful engine in the Detroit Diesel 8V92 TA V8 with 750 horsepower, which is around 230 horsepower over the stock V12 engine. Despite the increased weight caused by substantial vehicle improvements, with the Jaguar weighing in at 41.7 metric tons, which is an increase of nearly 6 tons over the Type 59, it would have had substantially better acceleration due to having a nearly 25% increase in its power-to-weight ratio. Despite the increased power, the steel tracks from the Type 59 would remain the same, though with enhanced road wheels that were padded with rubber. Further, for armament, the Jaguar was equipped with the 105mm M68 cannon, of which was fully stabilized along with a complement of 34 to 36 rounds. Further, this vehicle would be equipped with a coaxial mounted 7.62mm machine gun, as well as a top-mounted 50 cal HMG. This M68 cannon was the same one found on the M60 tank that was seen in American service, as well as being on many different vehicles worldwide. Because of the parts bin nature of this vehicle, one could say that it was a Chinese vehicle based on a Soviet vehicle with American technological upgrades and a cannon that was originally created by the British, being that the M68 cannon was essentially an American upgraded L7 cannon. Armament aside, other improvements were made to this tank, especially in consideration to armor, with a still classified armor composite, likely a composite screen over the front and sides of the hull and turret based on the limited photos of this tank, providing substantially improved protection over the Type 59, especially versus heat shells. Further, this protection would have provided NBC, or nuclear biological chemical protection, including an optional overpressure system. Even beyond this already substantially increased firepower, armor, and mobility, the Jaguar also also benefited from passive thermal sights and a digital fire control system. With the exception of the chassis itself, the entirety of this vehicle was essentially upgraded. Even further, the Jaguar featured a laser rangefinder, smoke grenades, and even had provisions for explosive reactive armor to be equipped to the outside of the vehicle. By all accounts, this was set to be the most advanced Type 59 ever. One could say that, in many ways, the Jaguar program mirrored the Super M48 program of Germany, with a similarly old M48 being upgraded after around 4 decades of service with many similar features, including a stabilizer, improved engine, improved electronics, additional advanced composite armors, and much more. But, much like the Super M48, the Jaguar, despite being a success and on a proven platform with many copies that exist worldwide, it was simply not meant to be. After the Tiananmen Square protest in June 1989, as well as the subsequent massacre of said protesters by the Communist Chinese government, relations between China and the US became strained. Because of this, China was the first to pull itself from the deal with the US to work on this vehicle, of which had only officially been announced just a few months prior. In spite of this, Cadillac Gage pressed on with the 2 Type 59s that it had in its possession in order to work on a general upgrade package for this tank to sell on the export market. This would have been compatible with the T-55 as well, which is the most produced tank in world history, a fact that Cadillac Gage was hoping to capitalize on. Though development continued on this tank in earnest, with 2 prototypes with slightly different configurations being created, this tank was simply never meant to be. With the close of the Cold War caused by the fall of the Soviet Union, the need for the Jaguar tank dissipated, as there was suddenly an excess of tanks on the export market that were being sold for cheap from the former Soviet Union. This was not good news for the Jaguar, as it ended up costing around $2.4 million per unit, which was substantially higher than the hoped $1 million per unit cost. That $1 million price, however, would have been the cost after production ramped up and economies of scale were established, so it's difficult to say for certain what the exact price would have been if orders had been placed. Despite the fact that Cadillac Gage continued work on the Jaguar, again after China pulled itself from the deal, it saw no export interest, and thus the project ended. Though the Jaguar project ended well after American and Chinese relations had soured, it marked one of the final times in which the two nations were cooperative together. Unfortunately for Cadillac Gage, this vehicle was created at the wrong time, and few countries, if any, were willing to purchase a single upgraded tank on an old chassis if they could simply purchase several former Soviet vehicles for the same price. Despite this, at least one Jaguar tank still exists today, as it was pictured in the late 2010s, rusting away at a depot in the United States. A sad end for what should have marked further cooperation between two powers, but now symbolizes what could have been. Thank you for watching.